Okay, we're recording.
Good afternoon. This is the May 13th meeting of the Finance Committee, and this, as the meeting that will be on Thursday, is a budget review. My first order of business is to call the meeting to order and make sure, seeing that there's a quorum, and make sure that members of the committee can hear and we can hear them. So I will just read out names as I see them on my screen. Bob Hagner,
Present.
Andy,
Present.
Bernie,
Present.
Andy,
Present.
and Alyssa is not here. And I believe Tom had a period of time where he was not going to be with us. And I think that's this
Yeah,
week.
Tom is gone this week.
Yeah, he's back when he's with you. So we are all here. Paul Bachman needs to leave in a half an hour, so we've agreed to do our best. Mandy and I both sent in some questions and try to think of what are larger picture questions that it would be great to get a response from Paul, and then Melissa is prepared to answer them. The other thing that's on today's agenda is for us to carve out enough time to have a quick discussion on the regional school budget so that we can write a report to the council, so we can vote on it and write a report to the council. And that is on the council committee agenda for Monday night. So trying to get that in after we do the general budget side would be great. Now, we normally open it up. I'm going to see public. We normally do public comments first. So I think, should I bring Sue Odette in? We have Sue and Jen are both in the attendee list.
Yeah.
Should I bring them in?
They should both come in. Yeah,
I just promoted them.
good.
I'm doing one at a time.
No, that's fine. So if there are any public comments, if you could be brief so that we can move on. So I'm just asking, are there any public comments at this point?
Melissa, Amber Martin is from the town clerk's office. You can bring her in too.
I'm working on it. Thanks.
Then we
There we go.
don't, okay, so Amber is here from, okay, great. We can have the minutes show there were no public comments. There's not much of a public left either. So Mandy, between the two of us, I can start on the request that we stay at the higher level for while Paul is here. Is that okay with you? And I don't even remember whether I shared mine with you. So I had two, Paul. One is there's and Paul is already aware of this. There is a general statement at the beginning about goals and roads, and we talk about Chapter 90. But at this point, Chapter 90 is not the core Chapter 90, not the supplemental we get from Fair Share. It's no longer in the capital budget, the capital plan as a line item called state aid. And when I looked at the appendices for grants, it's not in the grant either. And I realize we have to estimate it for FY 26, but it wasn't that I downloaded. You gave me the last 10 years worth of basic chapter
25 years, actually. Yep.
25 years, but it's hovered around the 830,000. So my request, I'd like to hear a reason why it shouldn't show up somewhere. I'm not saying where it should show up, so that when the statement on the goals is spend 1.5 million on roads, and we've got 750 in the cash capital. And without Chapter 90, we're nowhere close to that. But with Chapter 90, we're on target. So it's just a request to put it somewhere. And I don't have a preference on where it goes. I mean, it's always been in the capital plan. So people can see it.
Mhm.
So that's my bigger picture thing. And I think we could label it grant or label it allocation. It's not cash capital. It's not X, Y, or Z, but we could designate it the way we do ambulance fund, where we say this is the source.
So I think we're just at a disagreement on this, Kathy. I know you've expressed this to before during when we discussed the capital, and we don't put all the different levels of state aid into the budget itself. And I understand what you're saying, that we want to get credit for the Chapter 90. I think it's fine to identify it. We don't know what that number is going to be for next year. The governor is recommending much higher amount, which is really exciting. I was just on a call with the lieutenant governor, and they're really trying to push that. We're hoping it'll be more. So I don't think that we're hiding anything from the public. So I just
Well, if you look at the grant page in this year's budget book,
so it's not a grant.
you could call it anything you want. The supplemental Chapter 90 is there, but we are missing $830,000 from last year, but doesn't it have to show up somewhere is what I'm asking.
Not in
I
the
don't
municipal
know what
budget. It doesn't require appropriation by the municipal entity. You're a town council appropriating local funds, so it doesn't require an appropriation. I think that's our point on this, is that Hey, Melissa, do you want to speak to this at
Yeah,
all?
well, we don't appropriate but Chapter 70 either. We don't appropriate any of the state aid.
Right. It
It
doesn't.
and it was always, so for it not to appear anywhere when we actually have it in a budget seems to me flawed reasoning. So I'll let Mandy jump in, and then
I mean, I'll just say, so quite frankly, you can do whatever you want, but it is not a general fund account, and the general fund accounts are not part of the municipal budget, and that's why there are many grants and other funds that do not appear in the budget. And I have never budgeted that other places. I understand that you always have. It's always been a separate sort of standalone, this is how much we got for Chapter 90 this year. And I will say too that, yes, the 800 is the base amount. I think for the last couple of years, if you look at the Chapter 90 reporting, which we give when we give the road sort of updates, like we say how much road money there is, we generally get over $1 million, or have in the last few years, because Chapter 90, the message from the governor's office has been more. So, I'll own that. It was my
so I see
thought
there.
process, and I hear you loud and clear that you disagree with me.
So,
But fair enough.
So I'll turn it over to the two other hands. The suggestion Jen made during a JCPC is do a little footnote under the major thing. Say, in addition to this, we get a Chapter 90 allocation and put a dollar amount in, even if it was last year's. But that was a suggestion, and it's not in the current document. So I see both Mandy and Bernie want to weigh in on this. Mandy and then Bernie.
Yeah, I don't want to spend much more time. I agree, Paul, it's a disagreement, but two things. The first is right after we had that capital discussion last week, the council and you received an email from a constituent commenting and stating, you said you have this commitment, but you've only done $700,000 because nowhere in any of the budget documents is the Chapter 90 money even acknowledged. And that's where Kathy and I are saying you have to acknowledge it somewhere. Yes, it might not be part of the general fund budget, but the budget book includes, as Kathy said, a grants page. It includes revolving fund pages, things we don't actually budget, right? As a council, the general fund budget includes numbers that we don't have to budget, UGA, Chapter 70, things like that. But you're missing an opportunity to say and show the public in the big budget book how much we're actually devoting to roads and sidewalks. And that's the problem, I think, that Kathy is trying to say, is that opportunity is being missed, and we have an exact example of what that problem is when it is missed, which is the email we received from a constituent that said, we need 5 million a year and you're doing 3% of it or whatever it is because you're only doing 700,000 a year. And I wrote back to him and I said, actually, we're more than doubling that when you count our Chapter 90 money. You just don't see it in a budget. It would be great to be able to point to the budget book somewhere when everyone that is not council and involved in the budget is looking at these numbers very closely and trying to ensure that what you say in your opening statement is actually met in the numbers. And it's not done right now.
So Bernie, I'll let you talk. And then as Mandy said, we don't have to spend a long time on this because there's a disagreement. I'm not even saying where it should show up, but it's the
Well,
reason.
I just want to point out that two things. One, chapter 90 isn't road money. It's a variety of things. You can use for equipment, you can use other things. You can use for sidewalks. There's a bunch of, chapter 90 is weird because it comes with a list of things you can do and minimum amounts that you have to spend if you're going to use it in certain ways. It's a messy piece of legislation. I do agree, and I would prefer if somewhere in the budget book there was a simple statement of all sources. In addition to what we've budgeted, this is what we also get. It could be the last page in the book. But in that way, people won't, um, it'll be less mysterious. One of the things that's always frustrated me about municipal budgeting and trying to explain it is there's all these twists and turns in different pots of money that people don't see. And yet everybody at our staff has to take it into account. So long and short, one, chapter 90 isn't simply road money. It's money and we can use it in other ways.
So that's
Two, I agree that we should have somewhere in the budget book a list that says all sources. In addition to what you see, this is other money that we're going to spend this year because it comes from other sources.
So I think you've heard this, and if you do a word search in the current budget book, the word CH90 shows up about 12 times, and then you try to find a number and there isn't one. So that's just, and it is a communication with the public that I'm looking about, Paul. So we can stop with that. And then I think the other big picture one is more a comment. Well, it's two. One is an accounting issue, and then long term, on page 50 to 51, what I've looked at is that the projected deficits are more than $1 million every year. And that's with operating budgets being held to less than a 3% increase. So I would like to have a somewhat longer discussion about that. Maybe we have that as soon as we can in the finance committee meeting, because my question is, do we need to rethink the capital allocation at all? You know, can we, the second
so
part of should we start drawing down on the reserve for capital to pay for some of the buildings, you know, to pay for the debt servicing? So those were, we're running deficits with operating budgets held to a strangle amount. So that was my other bigger picture piece.
Yeah, so I think there's two comments on that. One is it's not unusual for us to show deficits at the beginning of the year. We show pretty much every beginning of every fiscal year we show a deficit, and because we're conservative in our projections for revenue, and we're conservative for our expenses, and we know that changes over time. It's not unusual to show out years. I mean, we can manipulate that, but I think that's not unusual. We often start this fiscal year we started with a deficit, and you saw that, and then we try to close that over time. The second question is more important in some ways in that what's the allocation for capital? And I think that's a year-to-year conversation. I think we've really tried to focus on maintaining our commitment to capital because we know both the infrastructure and our major capital projects are going to require a commitment to capital. And once you lose it, it's really hard to build it back in. So we know that we've already lost 0.25% this year in order to accommodate the ongoing expenses that we have. I think it's a really important conversation when you get to your financial guidelines to have that conversation in the fall.
Okay. So I will just leave it because it's the operating budgets in the past. We may have always had 2.5, but it's slightly under 3% for all of the operating budgets when I did it. You know, it's didn't round up to 3. So Melissa, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that we always budget. Those out year formulas have been in the spreadsheet that way for years. We always budget a smaller increase to try and understand what that looks like for us. You know, when we're going year to year, like, you know, what if we have to, how bad's it going to look? And I know that there was a question also, not only on the capital allocation, but on the OPEB, whether or not we could leave that at the 50%. And I will say that both Holly and I felt strongly, and I'll speak for her because this is something that she was very upset about, that we did not do this year, that we have a policy in place that we are going to increase that year over year. And we understand that that may be taken off the table when we get to the current year at hand based on the conditions, but to not have it out there says that we're planning not to meet our own plan for funding that liability. So that's why, we put it in there, and we know that it was changed in this year. And then we put it back in future years, knowing that, you're going to have but it makes it part of the conversation. And I think that that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it as part of the conversation and to say, these are real obligations, and you can choose to make decisions around those obligations based on priorities of the day. But to not put them in there just says, oh, we're just not going to pay attention to that anymore. And that was my opinion. And guess what? You don't have to deal with me anymore. So there you go.
So Mandy, and I'm going to say that those are my two, if I had to say what are the biggest picture, I think the others can easily be handled by all the staff that you've brought in. But Mandy, do you want to chime in on this or or segue to another topic?
I have two big picture things. One that might be easier to answer than the other one. So I'll start with the one I think is easier to answer, which is you've stated, and we can see in the budget book, that the operating side, the expense side of the operating budgets, there's the payroll side, and then there's the equipment. It's not really equipment, but expenses that aren't payroll. Are being level funded, and you can see that in the budget book. So what kind of effect is that going to have on the provision of services in our town?
It's huge. And I think you will hear that and I think it's a question you should ask your the major departments, especially, DPW and police and fire. They can tell you exactly the impact on that. And, it's been, we prioritize, as we said in the budget, we prioritized our people, but that has left the expense side to be level funded. And we could, we're making up, and but it's getting worse and worse. And this year is really, really, really tight. I think Holly could address that too when she's back from vacation. So I just had a conversation with DPW about it yesterday, that the devastation on their budget in terms of just when you have equipment repairs that come out of things like, we don't have a resource, a reserve for that. We've lived off of vacancies, quite honestly. Vacant positions leave some reserve in the year, but it's for all the major departments. Fire, especially this year, has had a lot of equipment failures that have to be absorbed within the operating budget. And we're scrambling to make sure we meet all those bills. So it's big, and it's not to be underestimated what that's going to do, because we haven't kept up on the expense side.
So can you predict in general terms if what types of services, presumably when the money runs out, the money runs out, so it would be seen more towards the spring and summer of next fiscal year. Can you in general terms predict what that might do to those services? Like, is it that we would be mowing less or driving our vehicles less?
Yeah, I think we take more of the discretionary funding out first, and Melissa can weigh in on this as well. Like if there are trainings, the former police chief said, cut my budget, but don't cut my training budget, because that's the most important thing for his staff. But there are things that are that aren't strictly core operational, like fixing a piece of equipment that needs to run for the fire department to run an ambulance or whatever, as opposed to, we'd like to send these two people to a training for paramedic training or something like that. So there's some things that could be delayed, but so I think that's the biggest challenge right now. Melissa has her hand up.
Melissa?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that we have traditionally, over the last several years, funded that through vacancies. And so we still do have vacancies in the town budget right now. But obviously there are less vacancies because we froze some positions. So that the amount to move those sort of the truck broke is most often the thing, you know, a piece of equipment broke. And sometimes we have come to you for money at free cash time, like when we know, like when, I mean, it was different in the sense that it was for the sewer department, so it came out of their retained earnings, but it was a similar operation where the contract to remove that kind of service, the contract to remove sludge is what it's called in the wastewater system, the cost on that escalated so much that it was just, there was nowhere to get it from. And so that's when then we'll have to come to you for emergency repairs or appropriations based on operating needs. And so in that case, it rose, he knew it was going to rise, but it rose so much more than he anticipated that we had to come back to you. So, you know, that might happen if we break a certain kind of equipment that is so expensive, that might happen again, that we just don't have enough room in the discretionary or vacancies to adapt to that.
And the other thing we do is we like around April, we tell people just stop spending money as best, you know, Holly has a very strict review of all expenditures and requests for expenditures, because it depends. And she looks at every budget in terms of, you don't have money to do what you want to do. And so, because we start to strangle that a little bit.
Andy,
Strangles it.
Yeah, it's just curious as we're having this general conversation whether the planning to not fill positions, which is what is being proposed for public safety and general government positions, is that going to affect the amount of carryover that might come at the end of the next fiscal year? Will it affect how the amount of money that is built up because of staff vacancies?
We'll have to see what that looks like. You know, we can compare it to what we did in FY24, what we carried over based on unspent budgets. You know, a lot of that unspent, those unfilled positions, which we have a lot on, and with police and fire especially, and will be absorbed in different ways with the expense side.
so Mandy,
I wanted to switch directions unless you have comments on this one still. Patty.
I think that's a good thing to note, you know, and some of it may be, you know, when we do an executive summary, it's a good thing to pull out because it's not department specific. It's and just the only comment I have on this is in one of the public comments, there was the schools have to budget for those operating expenses, and you don't necessarily have to. So I didn't know, you know, whether I have to look at the school budgets to see how much they've level funded the same kinds of things, because my sense is, for the most part, they didn't, but their expenses are quite different. You know, it's cost of a van driver and, you know, buses. So would the schools, you know, the schools can't stop running in the spring, just don't spend anymore. You know, I have no.
They do the same thing we do. We all have to manage the same situation.
You know, so, but you have an easier ability, I guess, to come back and say, we need an emergency allotment, and I'm talking just the expense side of the budget. Yeah.
Well, the schools have that opportunity as well.
Okay.
And we don't come, as you know, we don't come back to the council looking for appropriations for operating.
Okay. Bernie and then Melissa. You're muted, Bernie.
I probably should keep the microphone on because it'll keep me from saying things that are outrageous. I'm having a tough time. I always have a tough time with these discussions because I've lived municipal budgets for over 4 towns and 40 years. And I think we do, and Paul, I've given Paul enough grief over his time here, whether I'm on a committee or not. I think Paul and his staff do a remarkable job of skating on very thin ice to bring this thing home every year. I am firmly of the belief that we are understaffed and underexpensed on the town side, the administrative side, and find myself reminding people that if stuff in town hall doesn't work, everybody goes broke. So we need to keep that in mind. I also like to point out that school budgets not really, it's sort of a spending plan, because schools are authorized to spend that money for any lawful purpose, and they can slip and slide all over the place with their budgets. We aren't quite on the municipal side. We don't have that degree of flexibility. So it takes a different planning. The other piece that and this is my last term on the finance committee, so I'll repeat this a couple of more times. Just because the town is not for profit doesn't mean we can't or shouldn't retain revenues, because those retained revenues are the source of funding for capital projects. Capital is important. It's the source of revenue when we run into an emergency situation, regardless of what piece of the town you are. And these are lessons I think we need to do a better job of somehow communicating to the rest of the community, and to the folks who operate the regional government. So that's it. I'll get off my high horse right now, and but I do want to say thank you to Paul and his staff and Melissa. We will miss you. Now, if we could get you to reconsider, please. I guess people have already tried, but no. So again, this is tough stuff,
Okay,
and
so
that's it.
yeah, and I am taking notes, Bernie, so you should be looking at the executive summary when we write it this year too, to make sure some of these thoughts come back in. So we've got a few more minutes of Paul's time, Mandy, so did you have another one?
I did. So I ask a variation of this every year, but when you look at, and this goes beyond the general government section, but DEI, senior services, recreation, library, all do community programming. When we look at their programming, how are we ensuring that it's neither duplicative nor overlapping, not just in the programming that's offered, but in the scheduling and, efficiency of making the programming happen? So it's not just making sure that X reading event, say, or X sports event is not offered at the same time in two different locations. It's making sure two employees aren't trying to contact the same people. So do we have employees that are essentially duplicating work because they're setting up these similar programs for similar populations, but at different locations? How are we looking at restructuring the departments to ensure that there's robust programming, but that it's created and offered in an efficient manner?
Yeah, I would respond to that by saying there's a lot of collaboration and support for each other. So you're right that the library does programming, recreation, DEI, CREST. There's lots of different departments that are all in the same space, but they really are, and seniors even. But they're communicating really well together. They say, I'm planning on this. This would be great for and they offer support for it. I think they try not to overlap or duplicate. And I think, Pamela and Philip are here. They can speak to DEI's role, because we really have tried to, and they have taken the initiative to include DEI initiatives in all kinds of functions that the town offers. For instance, at the sustainability fair, really important to have a DEI perspective there. DEI was present, CREST was present. So because these are not siloed areas, and being able to include and welcome people is really important. And I think the library has a very robust initiative, and and they're available. They bring books to lots of different events, and for the global affairs event that was so popular, it had just so many participants in it. People could take out library books right then and there. So I think that I hear what you're saying in terms of like, are we overlapping? But I think it is more like collaborating, and I think, again, Pamela and Philip could probably address this since they're in the room right now, and you could probably talk to Ray or Sharon or anybody about how they work together, because it is really, they're talking to each other all the time, and Angela in our office and Sam as well.
Bob, do you want to follow up on that?
I don't want to, I want to just mention one other thing before Paul leaves, so.
Mhm.
Okay.
Can I
That'd
go
be
ahead?
fine. Yeah, absolutely. And this was, I won't revisit this, Melissa, with, my question was also the HR has a 2-person team, DEI has a 2-person, these are small teams. And to what extent do we actually have a 4-person team on some issues, not on every issue, and there's the Human Rights Commission. So I had a similar question, and I think that answer works well for that. And so Bob, well, you have a few.
Yeah, I just think it's time to start planning for what we're going to do with Wildwood. I know it belongs to the school, it does belong to the town, but I mean, it's going to be vacant at the end of June of next year. So it's now would be the time to form a group to start thinking about
Mhm.
what we're going to do with it.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you've thought of that or not, but I do think, and also like any of the other vacant buildings, like the South Street, whatever it's called, the school on the South
Mhm.
Common.
Mhm.
We need to, these are assets that we have that we need to, figure out what we're going to do with them. So
Yes, so just you're absolutely right about Wildwood. It's a major policy decision for the town, assuming the schools say we don't need it for education purposes anymore. Now, we have done some assessment of Wildwood. We have a scanned 3D drawings of the entire building, so we know. So our Rob Moore is here. He can speak to it a little bit more if he wants, in terms of what that building looks like, what its capacity is, and the reasons we're abandoning it as a school are very real. But it might have some life in it, or it might be right. But that's the threshold question. Same for the South Amherst School. We're looking at that. We're looking at that as a potential source for affordable or senior housing or something like that. So there is some investigation work being done by staff on that with consultant support. So both of those buildings in particular, and Rob has his hand raised if you want him to address it.
So, Paul, do you need to run?
I'll jump when I need to. Appreciate
Okay.
that.
Okay, Rob.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, in addition to the building scanning and 3D walkthrough of the building, it was part of our facility conditions assessment project this year. And although we're still finalizing the recommendations and the details of those reports, we will have all that baseline information about the existing conditions of the building this year.
And Rob, I'm assuming that you have the extremely long section of the Danisco report that was on building condition, because they went through with this
Absolutely.
asbestos and wiring. I mean, it's a section of one of the initial. Yeah, I mean, it's now out of date because the building's 2 years older. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
So, Rob, when are these going to be finished? When can we kind of start, talking about reuse or surplusing or whatever?
Or
So-
Rob, you also saying when can we read these reports?
Yeah, I mean, when are we, when is it going to be? When is the survey, et cetera, going to be done so we can start, doing what we need to do?
So the building scanning project is done. So we have existing conditions drawings and 3D views and elevations and site information and flyover. All of that is complete and available, including 3D walkthrough of the interior of the building. The facility conditions assessments are all in, I'd say, advanced draft form. We are at the point where we are questioning some pricing on estimated cost from this firm that is from down south, and we believe have to make some adjustments for our area and public bidding and so on, that we're just working through those details. Drafts are available. If we were to distribute them, I would say do not focus on the dollar amounts. I think they're extremely low in the condition that they are in, and we're just trying to get those finalized so that the reports so it works better with the reports and the recommendations. But the general information is all collected. The on-site work of the firm is complete.
So yeah, just to support that. So these are drafts. We have the first drafts. When you put something out there, everybody latches onto the numbers, and then they say, "Why'd it go up?" Like, well, we're not even there yet, right? We have to do the due diligence from our staff's expertise. So I think when those things are prepared and ready. And I think we're not too far away from it, but
It,
Yeah.
it truly is just a staff capacity and, availability to work through those with the firm. This department is a staff of one, with Jeremiah doing most of that work and others helping when we can. So this year for sure.
Yeah, I
But
wasn't putting
it's,
pressure. I just,
yeah.
I just would like to know that when they're ready, so we can start really thinking about what to do with these facilities.
So that department has made great progress in, using ARPA funds, quite honestly, and achieving this.
Oh, Bernie,
Real quick, anchoring is a real phenomenon. So, when you do reports like this, the first numbers you see are the numbers that you
Yep.
remember and you latch onto. So it would be better to report a range. And if you're going to report a range, start high. The other thing I would hope is that for both Wildwood and for the school that's just down the street from me, I hope there's a bring the bulldozer option. I think we can waste a lot of time and energy trying to reuse a building that we've already said isn't terribly useful. And I have not been in the school that's down the street from me, but watching it over the years, let's bring the bulldozer and use that lot for a better purpose. And I have no idea what's in Wildwood. I look forward to reading that. But again, bring the bulldozer, demolish the building, recycle it, has to be an option, I think. Thank you.
okay, you are now on record for that.
Okay. So I'm going to exit now. Thank you. And if you're there,
Thanks.
yeah.
Thanks very much, Paul, for squeezing over a bit.
Yep. Thank you.
So, Mandy, I think Melissa, you put our two sets together so we can avoid overlapping. I can guess a couple of the ones that I would like to have an answer to now if we can. So maybe I'll go first, Mandy, if that makes sense to you. So for the elementary school, the extra money that we're putting in out of free cash, the 1%, it shows up on the expense side as an expense for the school, but I couldn't find it on the revenue side on how we pay for that. And yet the revenues and the expenses balance. So
I think that it accidentally, Holly caught this last week, is that it shows up in the miscellaneous.
Okay, so I figured
it's combined in that number. And I guess that's also how we did how we did it last year. So I think that the ARPA money ended up in that miscellaneous number or something like that. So in one part of the 5-year forecast, it's separated, and another part it's not. So,
Okay.
but it is there. It does tie, but you're right, it is mislabeled.
And I assumed it had to be somewhere, otherwise it wouldn't balance. You would be spending money you don't have. So, so that was my question on that. And then this is more a minor one, that there's a list at the very beginning of the staffing and what's changed across departments. On facility, it shows no change from the prior year. But on the facility page, it shows an increase of 0.8 FTE. And I'm pretty sure that's all Bob Parent. And, I don't know what year he became part of the budget. And I know the first time he was on our budget was all ARPA funding. So it was one of these. So there's just discrepancy on one page, which shows no staffing increase there, and another page that shows a 0.8. They both have the same total. So it's not the totals are different. So that is just purely, I don't know when the ARPA money ran out for support of him, but I know my memories was 3 years worth. And so I don't know where we are in the 3 years.
Yeah, so I know that he's fully funded in this fiscal year. And so that, like you said, we must have not tied out all the different places. And I believe that he was absorbed in fiscal 25, maybe half a year, because we didn't have any staff on payroll after December. So anyone that was being staffed as of December had to switch. So we probably just didn't manage the transition quite right
Okay.
there.
No, I can figure out how to write that up, but it was
Oh.
just that it is a position that it's, if you've been on the council for a while, it's a new position that we have, the special project coordinator, and it's been very useful. And initially it was proposed as temporary to get us over the hump of all
Mhm.
these big projects, but the big projects aren't going away. So
Right.
it makes sense. So I think we should probably, in the finance report on this general staffing, and when we do facilities, Bob, when we get to the facility side, or we're at it now, should just point it out. So
Yeah, and I can look back to what you're talking about and sort of I can figure out exactly when it switched and where we made the mistake in the budget like that.
okay, then the other one I have that I think both Mandy and I had is on the employee benefit page and then health insurance. It shows the number of people, individual plans, family plans, and it seems to add up to more than the total staff. Are we carrying any school staff at all in our in the health insurance amount? When I understand the difference between family and individual, but if I add the two up, it shouldn't be more than the total staff. Mandy, I think you had this too, just trying to figure out how to make those numbers match up.
So I haven't looked at it, so I'll have to look at that and understand that. But I will say that so I'm not I'm not sure how the elementary school, you know, like because they're on our bill, but I know we separate it. You know what I mean? Like because they're considered town employees, so they're part of one thing. And then I do know that we also you know, we insure retirees. That's part of being a municipal employee. So I don't believe that it's in that count, but that's the other thing I could look to, you know, like a post retiree um
Who's
who
not
is
yet
still who's not yet Medicare.
He's not yet Medicare. Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
it's,
I don't know, but I'll look into that and find out like what the what the difference is.
and I looked at last year's budget book. It was the same thing. So
Uh-huh.
it clearly, whatever we're doing, we're consistently doing, but
Mhm.
I just couldn't figure out how to make those numbers.
Yeah.
And Mandy, do you want to come in on this? Because I was just trying to, the other one I had was more general. And do we ever compare our health insurance choices and the structure to other towns? Whether it's retiree benefits and or, you know, are we particularly good? Are we about the middle of the pack? I think benefits are important to keep people, so I'm not saying that we should reduce them in any way.
So I will say that it was to my detriment to leave the town of Amherst as far as my benefit package.
Okay. Okay. And Mandy, do you want to come in on the benefits? Or,
Yeah, for me, it's just easier to refer to numbers because I think that clarifies potentially the question. So the staffing summary on page 44 indicates the municipal government has 256 FTEs.
Mhm.
On page 97, the service level chart implies that there are over 1,200 employees. If you look at the life insurance line, there's 1,263 life insurance policies, I guess. If you look at the health insurance line, there's over 1,500 health insurance policies.
Yeah, so that has to
And so
include,
I'm just trying to figure out, what do the service level lines include? Do they include retirees? Do they include library employees, school employees? What do those lines include that the staffing summary on page 44 does not include?
those numbers are more indicative of, you know, the double number of W-2s we produce and that kind of stuff. So it has to include the schools and or retirees as well. So you know, that $1,200 number is close to the number of, you know, like employees that the town of Amherst has, which includes the schools. And so my assumption is that it includes retirees as well, but I'll dig into that because I really, that huge disparity means it's a bigger picture than just the municipal of the four majors, right? Because library and schools are technically under the same employer as the town of Amherst, whereas the regional school is a separate employer. That's the only one that is fully separate than us.
But the dollars that are would just be for municipal employees, not the schools. Is that correct? Because I looked at the elementary school has a line for health insurance. So I'm thinking that maybe the people count
You know, I'll
is all
be
the people, but
I'll
they don't
be
match up with
honest
the
with you
dollars.
that Holly is digs into that number. So
Okay.
I wasn't the one who went through
Okay,
it with a
so if you
fine-tooth
could
comb, so
just,
but I'll find out and
if
get
you
back to you
just get
guys.
us an answer, Melissa, that's
Oh, okay, good,
great.
you're unfrozen. Do you want me to just, do you
So
have some other ones or?
Yeah, no, I have some other, well, I'm seeing the staff that's here too. So I had, Sean is here on IT. So well, in finance, one question is we've reduced the finance department by an FTE.
Yep.
What does that do to the functioning of the finance department?
So-
Paul explained who that slot was, but just, we're losing you, so I know what that does to us, but.
Right, so Jen might be able to speak more about how that impacts the department because it was a frontline service person. And that position, because I know that it's one of the questions we have here, the reason it's sort of confusing is that was a shared position. It was 0.4 in the assessor's office and 0.6 in the treasurer collector's office. And so then that position was eliminated. And that I will say that position was the only position where there was an actual person there, but she was able to transfer to a vacancy in another department that had a larger percentage of vacancies. You know what I mean? Like a stronger need maybe. So she is still with us. She still works closely with Jen and the assessor in the treasurer collector's office and with Kim in the assessor's office in her new role in the building inspections office. But because there is some overlap of the type of work around building permits and the kind of work that she's doing in the new role. But it does impact the frontline service levels, and Jen can probably speak better about that because it is her office and covering that window and coverage.
Jen?
There. So yes, that position covered our central service counter every morning from 8 to 1, and then went to the assessor's office in the afternoon to help with administrative items. So what that does is it puts more rotation for coverage up front on the existing staff in the office. So we're just trying to redo workload and make sure everything is getting covered.
Okay.
On page 82, there's a organization chart for the finance department. Is that position still listed on that chart or was it removed from the chart? Is it that customer assistant under the treasurer collector line on the chart on page 82? Or is
I
it no
believe
longer on the chart?
I believe I removed it.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll stay on the finance department, and this is a question, I guess, a combination of you and it may be also Holly. But the last several years, as you know, the investment income has been higher than we put in the report. We had in the projections, and it was because of the delayed capital projects and that the money was sitting there ready to be used. To what extent do you know already what those projects are likely to be in FY26? Or is that always, and on JCPC, so people know that we're on 3-year lags between ordering a fire engine and we get one, or some of the other equipment, it's on a lag. So we budget the money, but we don't spend it. And I'm thinking that I know a big chunk of it was the school, the combination of we moved 5 million out of reserves and we secured bond, and so we'll be spending it down. But do you have a sense of just looking at what's in the queue? You know, are we talking about there's a regular $5 or $6 million in there that's earning interest? And then, of course, we don't know what the interest it will be earning is. And I'm not asking for a specific answer, you know, and to what extent you can internally see that based on, you know, lags on its book to spend, but then we're not going to be spending it in a 12-month period.
So, and some big projects that I'm aware of, just because we were looking at them to make sure that we, well, that's not true. I was thinking how the radio project, there was a delay in the procurement, and so therefore that money didn't get spent because it was borrowed. We didn't borrow for that money, so that's not part of our cash reserves. But Jen can probably talk about how much she feels like she has in surplus right now and how quickly it's going, because I know that before, I think just even last week, I put in, you know, I send them little warnings, you know, we're about to spend $2 million on the warrant this week just for the school project alone. And that's sort of the commonplace every time we get like well, you know, Kathy, you've been in the school building. So those are going to start to move really fast. And then we'll start to move fast on the library if that construction project gets going once we start laying that. And then that we know, I think we've heard that we're going to get delivery on some of those older vehicles now. We don't have a lot of vehicles in this round, so those I don't anticipate us having a lot of money laying around for. And then the only other thing is, like, you know, is a project stalled, you know, so of the, you know, I'm thinking of the big ticket items, the maintenance item, you know, how quick is Rob and Jeremiah ready to get moving on spending that $1 million? Or did they have a project already lined up? But I know that they haven't, I don't believe, actually, Rob can speak to that they haven't procured it at this time. So, you know, that's kind of where I mean, I guess I don't have a good answer, because the smaller dollar things like the 20,000 here, or the,
Yeah.
you know, they go fast.
Yeah. No, I realize, you know, I'm more, for everyone to know, there was 500,000 last year in JC that was in the capital budget for roofs that was still sitting there. And we put another $1 million that's a fungible amount, can be used in any way for buildings. So there's $1.5 million that will be sitting in this kind of an account until Rob, Jeremiah, and others figure out how to spend it. So that's all I was wondering, to what extent we can internally see that's happening. And it's about your everyone's reluctance to overestimate revenues, you know, when we don't have a good reason to do it. But we've been low on investment for good reasons on the earnings. So I won't belabor that anymore. Mandy, I think the rest of mine are more minor. Just Sean is here on IT. There's still a budget for buying new software for the finance department. And we were told in finance, in JCPC, that if we do that, there's a licensing fee. Does that licensing fee hit us in FY26, or is that not till 27 is my question? You know, like, is it in the budget in anticipation in it, or is it?
So I can speak to that, Kathy, you know, because it's my little special gift to you
Your
all.
package.
But we wouldn't have a licensing fee until the software is procured and selected. And I think that the decision was made internally that while I was a big advocate for it, and I believe Jen and at least Sean and at least some of his team were big advocates for it, as far as being an efficient use of staff time. And, you know, as we sort of shrink our departments and how we can more effectively use our people, that it was a tool. So there was a reason for it. But that decision on which software to implement and when to start that implementation should be left with the new finance director, so that they, you know, choose what works best for them.
Okay.
And if they choose that this is not a good idea for them, then it'll go back to finance committee to use for something else.
So I'll go through my, I see we've got the Pamela Young and Phil. My questions for both of yours was just this two-person departments and working with each other. And I think Paul has already answered that pretty well, but if you want to respond to that, and then on accounting and general category, no, on town clerk, there's been a huge decline in registered voters. Do we have any idea why? Was one of my questions. And the other was, there's been a big increase in services for notary services. And if anyone's tried to get things notarized downtown, you used to be able to go to Hastings or Bank America. So I think everyone comes to the town now. So my question for that one was, do we charge? So those are three I'll just line up. And I don't know whether Phil and Pamela want to talk any more about these, your two-person departments. And you're doing Human Rights Commission. You're also, you're staffing other department of committees as well, and how that all works. So
Sure, I can jump right in. So we staff both the Human Rights Commission and the Commission for Persons with Disabilities. When I started the position, this DEI department actually staffed 4 committees. They were also responsible for the CSSJC and the African Heritage Reparation Assembly. African Heritage Reparation Assembly sunsetted, and the CSSJC is responsibility of the CREST director at this time. As far as your question about collaboration or partnerships or overlap with the other departments, as the town manager said, we work in collaboration with all of the departments that you mentioned. There's not an event, a large event that's planned in the town that does not include, as part of the planning commission, members from the library, members from rec, members from the CREST department, and the Amherst Global Village is a perfect example of that. They were all invited to the table, they all participated, and they all had a role to play in the planning of that event. And that's true for all of the major events that we have. I think the other part of the question that the town manager did not address is that the DEI department has reduced the number of large events that we're sponsoring. In the past, we held events for almost all of the cultural and ethnic groups in town. So we had Juneteenth, we had a Lunar New Year, we had Black History Month, and we decided to move to one event that would allow us to really showcase all of the various members of the community and their cultural and ethnic backgrounds, and that would allow all of those members to come together rather than having distinct events that didn't attract everyone to the table. So I think the Global Village did bring everyone to the table, and folks had a chance to see and learn from other members of the community.
Thank you. So, Min, did you want to continue this, or do you want to shift to my Sue question? Yeah.
So I'll stick with DEI, because maybe if we finish all the DEI questions, we can let our DEI department go then. If we stick to one department, we can maybe not have everyone stick around the whole time. Thank you for the answer. That makes sense with the large things, but when I was looking at the DEI upcoming objectives, it says things like expand youth events, including youth entrepreneurship program and youth know your rights program. And I look at that and I say, our recreation department has a lot of youth events. Our library has a lot of youth events. These are not big events necessarily. These are like ongoing programs and all. And what you talked about in your in the budget book on page 87 about expanding youth events are also in some sense some of those smaller ongoing events. And that's where I was asking the question about, are we duplicating, how are you collaborating with others to make sure, say, DEI is not planning a youth entrepreneurship program at the same time the library is planning one?
Right.
So things like that. So,
yes.
so how do they walk, or that you plan it in 2 different locations and to do it twice, one in Bangs and one in the library? How is that collaboration, or ensuring that duplications not going on that way.
So I think the first part of my answer also is the part of the answer to this question. But I would also say that there's a distinction between some of the events that we're doing with youth and the events that are being done or sponsored by the other departments, particularly the library or recreation, which has a more of a sports focus. So our events have been designed to really meet the needs that were requested from the CSSJC, or actually that was the Community Safety Working Group, that report, which asked specifically for youth empowerment events that include some targeted events for students of color and youth of color. Our events are open to all in the community, obviously, but the focus has been meant on sort of addressing some of those needs. And as I said before, there's not an event that we plan where we don't have a conversation with other departments in town to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts. And generally, we're asking for help because we are a department of two. It's nearly impossible for us to do all of these events without assistance from other departments. So we lean heavily on Crest. They're our next door neighbor on the floor, but we also lean heavily on the library. And as Paul mentioned, the library, I think, has attended every event that we've planned by showing up, by bringing books. We've also had Rec attend almost every event that we've planned by showing up and providing programming for younger kids or assisting in other ways.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
So I saw Sue turned her camera on when I got to town clerk and elections. So I had the two on this. It's not, I don't know what we can do about it, but it was a big decline in registered voters. And then the second is, do we charge for notary services? Because it's, even if it's a marginal fee, it looks like we provide a lot of them.
Yes, yes. Hello, everybody. And I have to dare say that this is probably my last Zoom meeting.
No.
No. No, I'm kidding. So the voter registration, so this is kind of old because it goes back to 2020 when COVID hit and all the students went home. That's our transient population that raises or lowers the number of registered voters in the town. And when they went home, they all registered to vote at home and voted by absentee ballot. But at the same time, the Votes Act brought on the ability to vote by mail with no excuse. And so we saw this when they came back that, we did a voter registration drive a couple years ago and tried to register voters up on the UMass campus. And we kept hearing from people, oh, I'm already registered at home. I'll just do a vote by mail ballot. That was the answer that was given. We didn't get one registered voter all afternoon. So that's what's happening. It's been a shift. People are voting in their home communities, even though they're living here. So it has been creeping up a little bit, but it's not to the levels where it was in past years before we had vote by mail. And then on the notarizations, we did actually raise our fees because, as you can see from the levels, what was it? We did like 1,260 notarizations in FY22 and 1,106 in FY23. It got to the point where our customer service assistant was standing at the counter almost all day long on many, many days. And I says, this is getting crazy. So we did raise our notarizations from $5 to $10 per notarization starting on July 1st of 2023. And it's gone down a little, but it's still right now. I just did a quick scan. We've done 817 notarizations so far this year, and we're not even done with the fiscal year. So it has gone down, but
Kathy, sorry to interrupt. Can we say thank you and farewell to Pamela and
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. Pamela and Phil, you can leave us. Your time is valuable. Thank you very much for joining us.
yeah, so that's pretty much, those are the answers to your two questions.
Those were my two. I think, Mandy, you had one about planning for the election, yeah, so let's stick with that. And I don't remember exactly what your question was.
Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but so I'm sure, Sue, you will correct me if I did my math wrong on estimating elections. But the current fiscal year had 2 elections to run. The fiscal year that we're talking about, FY26 budget, likely includes just one election to run, I think. But the budget for elections has not been reduced for election worker pay in FY26 as compared to FY25. So can you just explain the reasoning behind not reducing that pay in FY26 to match the number of elections being held during the actual fiscal year?
Yeah. I've actually never touched that budget. We leave it alone. And I think the reason for that, Holly would know. Yeah, you're nodding. I think it's because in case there's a special election, that sort of thing. So we just leave it alone. And we'll end up being one of those departments where there's excess cash at the end of the year that other departments can borrow from. I tend to not spend the budget. I'm very conservative. But going forward, I mean, you could do what you can. It depends on costs that you don't have any control over. But anyway, as far as that goes, I don't touch it.
Thank you.
If-
I think I've covered all of mine, Mandy. So
if I could just talk to, with Holly not here, I'm going to make some assumptions about why we do that. And my guess is that if it goes up and down like that, then it's hard in the year that that the elections for it to come back. And so it's just easier to have it based on a high number of election years and have that as a constant. And then, if the department doesn't overspend, and doesn't use it to, have special lunches or something like that, then I'm kidding. Of course, Sue would never do anything like that. But if then you don't have the problem like, well, like all of a sudden this year we have to go up, and where are we going to get that from? I that's my assumption on why we've always done it that way.
That's what I figured, but I thought I'd ask the question. That was my only elections / clerk question.
Okay, I had a more global question that is probably impossible to answer just on the town council support. I see how many meetings are listed that are town council related. At some point, and this is not for anyone on the screen to answer, I would like to know how much staff time we consume as the council, and just figure out if there's some way of aggregating that between committee meetings, council meetings, the number of meetings that were listed. And Melissa, I know how many meetings you go to. So I will post that was one of my questions. I will post my questions because I think we are a time intensive council, and I don't know whether that may be normal, but.
Kathy,
So
are you referring to, I think it depends how you count staff time. If you're including the staff who attend all the council committee meetings and the council meetings, or just the clerk's time, and so on. So I think you and I could get together and dive into that number. But if we're all set with Sue and Amber, and maybe Sean, can we let them go?
I have questions for IT.
So Amber, Sue,
okay.
John, but I was just thinking, Dave Zomack staffs the CRC. I don't know how many people show up at TSO, Andy, on a regular basis. Then we're staffed minimalistically in school building because I can run the Zoom meeting. So Angela signs us on and leaves. And then we have about 4 staff people in that meeting. So it just struck me that there's a lot of people. We just got Jen coming now to the school building committee and to the library building committee, in terms of replacing Melissa. So it's an observation rather than I need a number, but it's a lot of meetings that are being staffed by the staff.
Yeah,
Bernie's nodding.
We can run some reports. Yeah, we can run some reports based on our Zoom usage and give you some estimates.
Okay, thank you.
So I will say, Kathy, having worked in several other communities, the staff time for this council is more than your neighbors. It's not a good or a bad thing. It just is, it's a different structure, and it demands more attention.
Thank you.
Melissa, are you speaking about communities that have city forms of government or
Yep.
town forms of government? Okay.
City forms of government. I've worked with both. Every community I've ever worked in has been a city form of government, either with a town manager or with a mayor. So those are slightly different, but I've been in 5. So
So that's good. And maybe I'll do an exit interview with you, Melissa, since you're not leaving the country or the state.
yeah.
Just so Andy's hand is up and Mandy's hand is up, but I am done with this was just so everyone knows, this was my section of the budget, so why I did more, but I am completely done with my questions. And if there's no other questions of the town clerk elections, then we could thank Amber and Sue Adet, but I see Mandy's hand is up. And Andy, I will call on you too. So while we've got Sean here, Amber.
Yeah, I just have one more that I forgot on my town clerk's office. If Andy is yours clerk?
Go ahead.
Okay. I've noticed a spike in public records request. And so this is similar to the notary question, I guess, which is how does that spike affect the clerk's office ability to do your other things? And how do we help with that?
Oh, I wish you could. It does impact. And each request that we've had, some are easy and simple. I send it out, I get the response, I send it out and the response out. But others take multiple people, multiple departments, multiple research. We can bill for some, we can't bill for some. We do have to involve the town attorney. It depends. And it's just, I know Bob Parent, he's been involved heavily in some of these public records requests, and he's always joking, this is a full-time job. He says, I know. So I don't know, it is almost a full-time job. I do believe there's state legislature, there's some senators and Congress people looking into this in other parts of the state because it has put a huge burden on the clerks. I don't know what's going to come of it, but I guess all we can say is that when it gets to the point where we're not doing our other duties, we're going to have to say something. It's not quite there yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything more for Sue or Amber? Andy?
Yeah, actually, I was going to go back to something that you had raised, Kathy, which was the question about whether the council is absorbing a lot of staff time, but it's not just the council. Having observed Amherst government for quite a number of years before we had a council, we've always been very committee driven and have had probably more committees than a lot of other communities have. And I was wondering about whether that is having an impact on the clerk's office because of the need both to monitor appointments and posting some meetings, but also things like adherence to requirements like conflict of interest trainings. And, is that a huge drain on the office now? And cumulatively, is there any way that it could be made more efficient if it is?
Well, I've been here since 2005, and I would say that there probably aren't that many more committees than were around in 2005. Some come, some go. It's not a huge drain. We do share the responsibility with the town manager's office. They send out the letters, the appointment letters. They keep track. They have their own database, and we have our own database for the swearing in and handing out the paperwork. It's kind of a split duty. So I haven't seen it really go up that much over the years. I mean, if it has, it's very slight. So, but yes, it's definitely a board and committee heavy town. Our book is a 3-inch spring-bound or notebook that's full. It's full. So I guess that's an answer to your question. Is there any other part that I missed?
No, I think that's generally it.
Okay.
And right, I guess you were asking about the committee that I chair, TSO, and we, the Guilford and Paul are the principal people who regularly attend or frequently attend meetings of that committee. But one of the things that we've been working on quite a bit is the whole transportation element of the community, and there seems to be always an interest in that. And if I looking for duplication of staff time, that's what we've discovered as we've been looking at the Transportation Advisory Committee proposal. Is generally it's that we have multiple committees that do the same thing, both council and non-council committees, and every time you have to make a presentation multiple times, it detracts from your other work. And that's something that I think that all of us just need to be aware of, but I'm not sure that it's a budget question as much as an efficiency question.
Yeah, no, I was focusing on it as efficiency. I see Athena's hand is up.
Just a really quick point about your question, Andy. I think a lot of the work that is involved in supporting all the town committees is spread across many different departments. So if the ECAC decides to hold extra meetings, that's not necessarily reflected in a lot of additional work through the town clerk's office, but it is for the sustainability director, a lot of extra time posting meetings and packets and organizing materials and finding meeting space and so on. Bernie's committee just formed another subcommittee. So the Charter Review Committee is now 3 separate committees that posts meetings and packets and materials and so on. And that's not reflected in the budget. So you'll see a lot of that spread across the different departments that support committees, not necessarily in the town clerk's service.
Bernie, and I just
sorry to throw shade at you.
No,
well,
I just
I'm like at this point I'm 1/8 of that committee. But I'll be willing to take the blame for it. That's the Charter Review Committee, which wasn't resourced. We have Athena to lean on, and we came back to the council and asked for money. Again, having observed this town and serving committees in this town, every committee generates demands somewhere in the system. And some of the stuff the committees do would probably be better done by staff if we had staff available, but we don't necessarily have it. We're staffed kind of thin, or we don't have a good resource pool. So when I was in Franklin County, I could rely on the FERCog to boost staffing for me, and I didn't have to have committees to do some of the work. See, it's a complicated matter, but every time we generate a committee or a subcommittee, we do generate work and we do spread it around, and that is incremental. It builds over time. And I can also tell you, Sue is being modest, I think, in terms of trying to do the cat herding and getting everybody in and sworn and keeping trainings up to date and everything else. That's a headache. And if you miss one person and there's a complaint or a concern, that becomes time consuming in and of itself too. So it's a good question. And I think we need to be careful when we say, well, we'll have another committee.
So since we're talking about staff time, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 staff here. So do we have more questions for the clerk? Do we have any questions for Sean Hannon? And then we've got Rob Mora and Jen. Mandy's hand went up. So I want to let people go who we don't, and you're muted, Mandy.
Sorry, I have questions for Sean in IT, but not the clerk's office.
So you have, so if no one has any more for Sue and Amber, you can we thank you for your time and thank you for the work you do for the town. You can leave or you can stay, but you're no longer, you're on demand.
Just
And anything of Rob Mora?
here to watch. Bye, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
No, I've got to
And
do public records requests, so thank you.
planning and conservation's next week, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure
So
there'll be
Rob,
questions
Rob,
then.
you can also, unless you want to stay, and then
I
I
was just here for any facilities questions because Jeremiah was unavailable. I can.
Yeah, so the ones I listed would be great just to get it. I wanted you listed 10 buildings, 14 buildings that you're doing the studies on. If we could just get a list of the buildings and the question that I asked earlier and Paul took notes on, can you also do Crocker Farm, the school? And so it's a question, do you have the capacity to do the same kind of assessment of it to complete the things? So and Paul said he'd make a note of it. He thought it was a good idea. So I kind of had that one answered earlier. So,
Okay, so
but
nothing
that would
else
be
from me
great
at
if,
this time. Yeah, the list of all the list of buildings that we cover and the list of the buildings that have been completed were actually included in the memo that we prepared and sent in March, but we can resend that.
right, because
Um,
what I'm remembering then is it was 10, and in the budget book it says 14. So I was wondering whether that 10 was the full list, and there's another 4 that I didn't know about. So
So
I do have the, yeah,
yeah, there are 14 buildings that we list as maintaining and covering, repairs and regular routine maintenance of, and then there were 11 buildings that were subject to the facilities conditions assessment project. That was a contracted project with a vendor. So those are two different numbers, but the 10 to 14, I think, is the number of buildings that we actually work on every year.
okay.
Yeah, I had a question. What were the 4 that were added in FY24?
The 4 that are new to the list that didn't show up in prior budget reports, and I'll just say that when I started helping years ago, when it was a townwide facilities department, there were only 7 buildings on the town side. So I'm not sure what year you would be looking at exactly, but the 4 most recent include the Hickory Ridge buildings, the Animal Control building, and North and Central fire stations that were not typically or in the past managed or overseen by the town facilities department.
Okay, because I'm just looking at the budget book on page 113, and the number of facilities managed jumps from 10 to 14, and the square feet maintained is doubled. And so there's got to be some bigger buildings in there.
There are, yeah. So I think what explains the most of that is Jeremiah a couple years ago started doing a lot of work at the garage, the Boltwood garage, which is a giant number, 50 plus thousand square feet. So I think that's probably the one that's made the most difference in addition to the fire stations.
Okay. And there was in the discussion, or they talked about as a challenge that we're seeing more evening use of buildings. And I'm wondering what buildings are being used in the evening that weren't being used before.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't think that they haven't been used before, but maybe it's slowed down quite a bit. The Bangs obviously, gets a lot of use off regular hours for our staff, and the Munson building gets a lot of activity both in the upper and lower spaces. And then the most recent, the new space that we're responsible for is the North Amherst Library space. That is just, that's only months, I think, of being live with reservations.
Well, this goes back to FY24. This is what I'm looking in the budget book. It goes to it ends at FY24. So
yeah, so just the usage started picking up following COVID. I think from what I remember back, before 2020, the Bangs center was used quite a bit in the evening, and I think we shifted around staff where we used to have late night coverage there, more custodial staff on site at the Bangs, and that position ended up covering town hall, and there was some extra buildings taken on Munson and North Amherst where we need to provide part-time custodial staff as well. So those individuals move around throughout the week and, just kind of spread out with the same core group that we had or number of employees that we had.
Mhm. Okay. I was just curious as to kind of what was happening, but thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think those are the questions for you, Rob. And then Mandy said she has one of Sean. So again, if you would like to leave us, we thank you very much
Yeah.
for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
So Sean, two questions for me.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can answer them both.
Yeah.
The first one is they're in the service levels, which is on page 101, I guess. There's a huge, like, more than quadrupling of YouTube channel views
Yes.
just in FY23.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So thanks for sending the questions over ahead of time because it gave me a chance to look at this. So I don't have an answer for it, but what I can do is I can share with you. I did take a screenshot through the reporting we have. Does that show up for you?
Yes.
Through the reporting we have of our YouTube views. So you can see these are the top 5 events or the top 5 recordings on YouTube for FY23. And you can see the viewer numbers. So Board of Health meeting on May 11th. I should know what was discussed then, but there were 5,200 views of that. Finance Committee, May 26th. I guess the Finance Committee meeting must have been interesting that day. 2,300. So you can see these are the 5 most heavily viewed items in FY23. And then you get up to FY24, and the most heavily viewed item had 428 views. And that was the African Heritage Reparation Assembly, followed by the Town Council on March 4th, at 226. So I guess I don't have an answer why the numbers went down. Just that it does seem legitimate. I went through and looked. I looked when we were putting the numbers together for the budget book just to make sure, because there was such a dramatic change, to make sure I reran the numbers from FY23 to make sure that I didn't make a mistake that time and misreport the number higher than it should be.
And these are different than Zoom meetings, right? These are the YouTube.
Yeah. So what happens is all of our meetings are recorded in Zoom, and then weekly somebody in IT takes those Zoom recordings and uploads them to YouTube and puts them in a channel. So it's possible I could work with Athena on running the reports on our Zoom viewership. It's possible that we saw more live Zoom viewership in FY24 and less after the fact in YouTube. So we don't go, with a few exceptions, we don't go live on YouTube. So if somebody's watching the council meeting live, they're either watching it on Amherst Media or they're watching it on Zoom. If they're watching it after the fact, they're either watching it on YouTube or they're watching it on Amherst Media. And so I guess one of the other questions, there were some questions about Amherst Media.
That was mine.
Yeah, so I'm happy to ask them. They won't have viewership numbers for live views, but they will have viewership numbers for streaming views. So if somebody goes on Amherst Media's site and streams it from there, there should be a record of that with Amherst Media. We don't see those numbers, but they should have that.
So my question around Amherst Media, just since he's raised it, Mandy, is the contract with Amherst Media, is that billed to the IT department?
No. So the way the contract with Amherst Media works is every 10 years. So that was last signed in 2026. The town signs a franchise agreement with Comcast, And part of the agreement with Comcast is, and this was in 2016, was that 5% of the cable TV subscription fees, 5% gets added onto that for the subscribers as a franchise fee. And that money is given from Comcast to the town. That's money to provide PEG services, so public education and government services. And then from there, it was the select board at the time negotiated a contract with Amherst Media for to essentially to turn that money over to Amherst Media to provide those services. So under the current contract that expires in mid-October 2026, Comcast pays money. The Comcast subscribers in Amherst pay money to Comcast on their bill. That money goes to the town. That money is then given to Amherst Media to provide these services, to provide the PEG services. So the town doesn't pay, the town itself doesn't pay for Amherst Media, but the subscribers,
Okay.
Comcast television subscribers in town do pay through their cable bill. They pay for those services. We don't pay any more or less, or we don't pay any less if they don't cover more meetings. The town manager under the current contract, as they got shifted with the charter, the town manager can request additional meetings be covered, and it's up to the town manager and Amherst Media to negotiate if there's an additional cost for it.
And, you know, the specific one I had, but you won't be able to answer this, is the value added of having Amherst Media cover the finance committee meetings. And it would be mainly if someone is at home at 2 o'clock in the afternoon wanting to watch us. Because
On Zoom,
Yeah,
otherwise.
not on Zoom.
correct,
It
yeah.
was not on Zoom, exactly, Mandy, you know, so it's, you know, Amherst, so I have found it useful for a couple of the other kinds of meetings where I want to watch it live and not on Zoom. But yeah, Mandy, that was my question on the is it useful middle of the day to have this piece? So you probably can't answer that. So it's a larger, you know,
Right. So
yeah.
what I do know is it's obviously very different now with Zoom. So Amherst Media is not sending somebody to the town. Previously, they had to send somebody to the town with a, you know, when it was on the first floor meeting room, with a camera set up so they could broadcast it live and they could record it. I couldn't answer how much staff time it takes at Amherst Media, but it's they're setting it up to broadcast, and then they record it and broadcast it. So I would anticipate that, you know, that the negotiation will be a little bit different this time around, because it's very different now how they broadcast meetings, which meetings they broadcast. And so the other thing to remember is the contract was originally negotiated when there was town meeting and select board. And it was modified when the charter change went into effect. But there was little modification to it. They changed town meeting and select board to town council meetings, and they, you know, there were some other little changes. But that's they're not sending staff to record and broadcast meetings. And in the same sense, if somebody wants to access the finance committee meeting now, they can do it through Zoom and they can do it through YouTube. Whereas previously they either had to be in that, you know, they had to squeeze into the first floor meeting room where there were probably 3 extra seats, or they had to watch it on TV.
So you know, I'm conscious of the time, and we have one
Yeah.
other not relate. No, and I don't want to cut you off at all, but
No.
I'm conscious of your time, and also we have one other thing we have to do that's beyond the review of these sections of the budget. So does anyone have any additional questions of Sean, Jen, Melissa, that have to do with this section of the budget? Because the thing we have to do is the vote on the regional school budget. Mandy.
I do. One for Sean, and then the rest go to the town council and town manager's office, and they're related. For Sean, you had in your budget some of the whatever the descriptions of ongoing or projects or whatever. That you were talking about integrating timekeeping systems with Munis for police, fire, recreation, and schools. So could you talk more about what the town's IT role is? For school technology upgrades?
Yeah. Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, the schools have their own IT department who manage the vast majority of their technology. The role that the town has in collaboration with the schools is the fiber connecting the buildings was put in by the town, and for the most part, town IT manages that. The internet connection we share with the schools, so that's something managed by town IT. And then the last big one is our financial database, Munis, which is hosted on the town side, is a shared database system with the schools. So the elementary schools have they're shared in with the town database, and then there's a separate database for region and separate database for Pelham. So the schools they have their own timekeeping system currently that does not automatically bring the payroll data. So all the payroll data happens through our Munis system on the town side. It does not bring all of that in automatically. There's a manual process there, and the schools are looking at automating that. And so the town's role in that on the school side of things is just simply supporting them getting the data into the right format so that it can end up in our payroll system. The schools have been doing the lion's share of the work. The school IT person has been doing the lion's share of the work on that, but they are looking to integrate that to basically save a lot of staff time. And that is something that we do. The town IT department bills back to the schools. So we take our Munis bill and some of the town IT staff time, and every year we send a bill to the schools, and so the schools pay their portion of that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Andy?
Yeah, Sean, you mentioned Amherst Media and Comcast and the fact that the contracts are nearing an end. You don't have that in the upcoming objectives section for things that are coming, but that's going to be
yeah.
I think that's going to be a fairly major problem this year because there's been so much change in the industry.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think there was talk about it going in the town managers upcoming things, but I don't think it made it in there. So it is the last time I luckily and Andy was pretty heavily involved in it last time too. Had the joy of going through it last time as select board, and then Andy was also part of the negotiation committee as a select board representative. So it is a big process. It is going to be starting soon because it does. We are actually in the renewal phase. The renewal phase starts 3 years before the contract ends, which is October 16th of 26. So we are in the renewal phase. One interesting thing that we do get out of that is there's an ascertainment process that Comcast that the town does with Comcast, and Comcast as part of that will survey town residents, town cable subscribers, and they will ask questions about their viewership of the three PEG channels. So at some point, I would expect probably in the coming months, we should get a report from Comcast that shows basically satisfaction with Comcast, satisfaction with Amherst Media, how often they view stuff on those channels. So that will be interesting to see, and we'll be able to compare it to last year.
Andy, it is in the
they-
town manager's budget on page 79 as an objective.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, yeah, that is helpful. I think the ascertainment's just the beginning of the process, and it's going to be interesting this year because the amount of revenue with cord cutting that has happened for standard cable
Yeah,
is great, so that the amount of resources that are going to be available for Amherst Media and for the town are going to be substantially decreased. And I'm not sure how this is going to play out for the next round. We've really moved into a new era of providing PEG services. A lot of it is being done through Zoom.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
doing it ourselves. We're not using Amherst Media for the same purposes to the extent that we are. So it's going to be, we're really in a different era.
Yeah, I agree.
Mandy, did your hand go back up?
Yes, but I'd be happy to move on. My question isn't for Sean. So-
Okay, and is there any other question of Sean, or Sean can leave?
Okay, there was one more question on the list that I have a really quick answer to if you're
Okay.
interested, and it was just about notes. There was a question about for both DEI and IT for staff transition savings. And that, so there was, if you look at our personnel budget, it's slightly down this year compared to previous year. And that's simply, we had somebody, our information specialist left last year, and we hired a new one this March. And that person is at a lower step than the previous person. So that's why you see a savings there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
So my final question relates both to the town council and the town manager office's budgets, particularly with payroll. 3/4 of the clerk of the council's salary is in the town council, 1/4 is in the town manager office, and the town council payroll number is increasing by $11,000+ presumably all 3/4 of the full salary because our stipends are not increasing this year. The other 1/4 in theory should be in the town manager's office, but the town manager's office total salary increase is only $4,000. And that is supposedly supposed to include the manager's 3% increase in salary, as well as the other 2.75 or 1.75 FTEs in the manager's office, as well as the clerk of the council's 1/4 salary. And I just don't see how the math works amongst the two. So I would like an explanation as to how the town manager's office payroll number is only going up $4,000 when I do the math can't include all of the step and COLA increases that the council has voted for the manager, and then presumably the other 1/4 of the clerk of the council's salary increase, as well as the assistant town manager and another 0.75 FTE. I just don't see how it works. So can someone address it?
Yep. So I can address it if you like. So part of the savings that you're not calculating there is the Sam is 3/4 in that, the communications person, and that position was held by Brianna, who had been here a long time. So she would have been at the top of her range, whereas Sam probably didn't come in. I don't know the exact step differential, but there's usually a significant amount of savings when a long-term staff person leaves at the top of the range and then someone comes in closer to the middle or the bottom of the range. And so the increase to the town manager is being offset by a savings in a change in personnel, and how those shifts, we always budget for the top of the range so that, should we get someone that we want to offer a higher end salary to, it's available. But then when they come in, that salary is negotiated based on the staff member individually. And then there's another, also the the only things that are budgeted in this year's budget right now for all staff, because none of the contracts have been none of the contracts have been finalized, but I mean, with the exception, of course, of the town manager, but is all the COLAs. We assume a COLA so that we can negotiate in good faith, but any increase beyond that, that COLA or change in a contract amount is held in a personnel line separate from each individual department. You know what I mean? So that
That's in the employee benefits line, right?
yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Thank you for that. So I think that is, and I do know, I'm not sure if it was also, oh, one of the other questions was about the community, some P off community.
Oh, CPOs.
Yeah.
And just sorry to add on to your answer about the communications manager, that position was reclassified as well. So Brianna was the director of communications and I think innovation. She had another one of those long titles, and that was reclassified as communications manager. So it wasn't just a different level in the steps. It was, I'm sorry, it wasn't just a difference in the steps. It was a difference in the level as well.
Thank you. But the CPO position that has been basically Angela Mills is taking on that role right now. So there won't be a new position.
I think, I think that covers this, and Jen can either stay with us or not, but the other item we need to do today, because the council has scheduled a vote on the regional school budget, is we need to have either a very quick discussion or just a motion to recommend an action by the council on the regional school budget, the operating budget. We've already taken care of the capital budget. And I'm seeing Mandy's hand is up. I don't know whether it's in response to this, but this was on our agenda and it's on the council agenda. So Mandy.
Yeah, I can do a motion. I would like a quick discussion after the motions. And there are two, I believe, so that I can write this up since I'm the person writing up this report, get a little idea of why the motion's going the way it is. But I believe there are two motions to make. So I'll make the first one, which is to recommend the council separately consider and act on financial order FY 26-02. Well, what is that? The Amherst Pelham Regional School District FY 26 budget and appropriation of the town of Amherst share pursuant to Charter Section 5.5C.
That was a long enough detailed motion that if you've written it out, maybe we'll put it up on the screen.
Well, I had it shorter. I tried to add a title and I don't even know the title. It was recommend that the council separately consider and act on financial order FY 2602 pursuant to Charter Section 5.5C.
And when you say act upon, do you mean approve?
No, that's a second motion. This is the section of 5.5C is the section that allows the council to with what is it? Separately consider and act on a portion of a budget because it would be prudent to do so.
Okay.
That's the section. So we have to vote that separately than the actual budget. So the motion that I just made, if there's a second, is the one that's recommending the council take that action as a separate thing.
I will second it, and then she read it quickly. Does anyone need to see it up on the screen? Okay.
This is just, we should vote it separate. This is asking the council.
I understand that we're taking it out of the regular budget, the full budget, and we're focusing on the regional school. So then, do you want to say what the second motion is, or do you want to have a discussion of the first motion
We
first?
should vote this one first. The second one's gonna be to recommend the financial order.
Okay, so is there a discussion of this before we move to the budget? I'm not seeing any.
I have one
Bob.
question.
Yeah.
I just want to confirm that this, that we're talking about the 4.1% increase. to the
4.8.
4.81%.
4.81, yes. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, I had just so people know, I had asked, have we done this before? Because I don't remember pulling the regional school out to completely vote on it separately. And I think this year is different because the other towns are all voting on it and they want to make sure we vote on it. But I didn't get a clear answer why we're doing it this way, but it's on the.
No, we always do it this way, and because we've always done it at the time of town meetings, we don't want to wait till the end of June. And
Right, so Andy, have we done it? Did we do this last year too? I just, you know, I
I
was.
It was not done last year, but it was done the year before, so I pulled the draft motion language from the FY
So
23.
that was just, I
FY
didn't,
24 vote.
Last year we had it, it was very late because we were messing around with the
right. Okay, so,
Because it was the 8.2 and then the 6 and all of that last year.
yeah, that was the problem last year.
okay, so,
Did anyone second? If not, I'll second.
yeah, I seconded it.
Okay, thank you.
So are we ready for a vote on this one? Okay, I will call for a vote. Bob?
Aye.
Kathy's a yes. Mandy?
Aye.
Bernie? That was, you're gonna have to unmute so I can hear you. I could see your lips.
Yeah, the space bar is not working. Support.
And Andy?
Yes.
It's unanimous with 2 people absent. I'll write that up. Or Mandy will write that up. So 1. Okay, then is your hand up, Bernie? No. And Mandy, second motion.
The next motion is to recommend the town council approve financial order FY 26-02 regional school budget assessment.
Second.
And this is the one where we should have a quick discussion on it. Mandy, why don't you lead off on it and then we'll put it to a vote?
Yeah, so my thoughts are, and I'm interested to hear others' thoughts. It's above guidance, although it matches the April vote of the council. It does match what the school committee voted. The biggest thing for me in supporting this one, I'm not too thrilled that it's above the council's initial guidance. I have struggled with some of the comments we received last week in response to some questions regarding the budget itself and prior statements on potential loss of positions that really just haven't that don't happen. And it's a good thing it doesn't happen. I don't want to say it's not, but it means I struggle with when a school committee and school district says in March that if a budget is passed, it will lose 12 positions. And then when they actually do show the current FTEs, 2 or 3 or none are lost. That this budget that they're claiming and state will lose 12 positions. I can't equivalently say it will because of past statements, past actual data. It's not statements, data that show that those statements tend not to be accurate. But the biggest thing for me here is I have been concerned that all of these guardrail votes in the past years regarding changes to assessment methods and the regional agreement to change and put these guardrails in place have been moving us farther and farther away from the regional agreement method and putting that burden on Amherst taxpayers in favor of lessening the burden of funding our regional schools from other to other towns, and that this budget gets us back to what all 4 towns in the regional agreement have voted. And that to me is one of the most important parts of saying, yes, we should pass this budget, is it gets us to that regional agreement method. We are one of the least affected of the towns in getting us to that as a year-over-year increase because other towns have been artificially lowered in their assessments due to the modifications to that assessment method. And so they're stepping up. I feel like for comedy, we need to too, but I'm still not happy that it's not within our guidance, our initial guidance.
So, does anyone, I have a comment, and Mandy has offered to draft this so that we'll have a report, but I agree with what you just said, and what I would like to do in the report is not just talk about the 4.8%, but talk about the share of the budget that Amherst will end up paying for, to point out that is roughly, it's not exactly equal to the number of students, our share of the students, and that the others will be roughly equal. So it's not that we have moved money onto other towns' budgets, but we're more in line with, if you're 5% of the enrollment and you're 78% of the enrollment, whatever. So I'd like to just put those, and we have Mandy, there in one of the background pieces, and I still have it, I think I saved it. We had the rolling 5-year average of the actual enrollment that gives you, separate from the regional agreement, gives you the people share. And it's not an exact match, but I just would like us to point that out, that this was getting us back to that. And then the other thing, having watched the school committee initial discussion that ended up with the budget we have in front of us, I would like to talk about the total increase in the budget, because it is more than 4.8, because we're getting back on. So the regional school, to raise the level a little bit on what we're talking about. So it's a different way of saying this is we're paying our fair share, and the budget is going up by more than 4.8 because all of the other towns. So just trying to capture that a little bit in our report to the council. So all the counselors understand this. You know, we had just not everyone, well, Bernie wouldn't see, but we had a recent public comment saying, well, we're only Amherst is 4.8 and someone else is 14. And so, you know, why aren't we paying more? Because there wasn't an understanding of the shares. So I just would like to make sure we write enough about the shares. And there was an option that the school committee didn't vote for that would have kept us to 4 if it had been shared, you know, and it would have been more cuts. So it just, that was the thing I wanted to add to what you just said. And we didn't get a clear answer about the ability of students to walk across the road back and forth and take classes at one or the other schools. And my understanding, when I heard the answer again during the school committee meeting, is that because the schedules aren't aligned, that's extremely difficult. So I'd like to just make a comment on that, that you can't use resources as efficiently as you might for the extra courses if you could get to a certain level of student enrollment if you allowed the students to move back and forth with the same number of teachers. And this is more music, art, languages. So I'd like to just put that should be a goal of doing it. And if we ever were going to move the middle school into the high school, it would have to be, they'd have to be aligned. You know, so I just like to we had that discussion briefly, and the answer was the teachers can move back and forth, but the students can't. So that would be the other piece I would want to do, that, you know, accepting this because the school committee did and the other towns have voted on it, and it's a way to move this forward. So I see Bob's hand is up. So I'm comfortable voting yes for this, by the way.
Yeah, I'm comfortable voting for it for the reasons that Mandy had stated, but I do wish to pose a concern, which is the overall increase of the budget is 6.5%, which is unsustainable. And I don't know what we're going to do next year, but we can't increase 6.5% next year. I mean, I think it's very important to get this, whatever whether it's a reconfiguration of the budget coordinating group or whatever, we've got to get this thing moving so that everyone has a common understanding of what the schools need and how we're going to provide it. And I agree with you, Kathy. The idea that, I mean, scheduling is, I mean, you can fix scheduling. I mean, you know, when my kids were going through the schools, there wasn't a schedule difference. And you know, they did fine. So I don't know what the issue is, why they've changed the scheduling different, but it's I mean, that's just something that we're imposing on the students. It's not the students that are imposing on us.
You know, that my understanding was that there's a team model in the middle school, and somehow the way that's set up makes, but yes, I'm not even talking about the curriculum, other than it's not a good idea to not have them aligned.
Right.
It's, you know, yeah.
It makes no sense. And you know, anyway, so you know, there was a, you know, when my kids were in high school, my younger kid, they started with two study halls, you know, to instead of one study hall. So they were cutting back, but maintaining a certain schedule. And you know, both he and his older brother took classes at one at UMass, one at I think they both took them at UMass when they were in seniors. So you know, again, that part of the equation also needs to be emphasized, that we have these others, you know, we have these great colleges, you know, great college and a great university, you know, within walking distance of the high school. And we should be able to figure out how to use those resources better than we do.
Ernie.
Yeah, and those resources from the colleges are something that I think that they could be generous with without getting into the whole mandated payments kind of thing. I mean, it's something that they could do in reasonably well, I think, and would provide a genuine contribution. One of the things I would like to suggest is a sort of is that there's been a number of discussions about having sustainability committees, or this committee or that committee, or a 15-person committee. I would strongly suggest that we not have another committee. I would think that the town manager and administrators and the superintendent should sit down with both the local services folks at the Department of Revenue and the appropriate staff at DESE, and ask DESE and DOR to take on a study of the funding and the funding situation and the ability of the towns to raise revenue, to take that on and report back to the towns. That takes a lot of the politics out of it. That takes a lot of emotion out of it, because then you get two pros, if you will, or three pros, or however many DESE and local services chooses to assign, to do an in-depth study. It might take them a year, but they've produced some pretty good studies. I think local services have. I've used them, and I think they're very skillful people. So rather than try to do it ourselves and get into pitching accusations or stances back and forth, let's see if we can get those resources to bear, bring some attention to the funding problems, because I do agree with Bob. It's been said over and over again. We can't continue to have 6+% increases and hope to continue to finance the whole municipality, never mind just the schools. So that would be my section. I'll support this. I'm not happy, because I agree with Councilor Haneke that I'm not happy that they've gone over the guidelines, but I think that was, that handwriting was on the wall right from the start of the budget discussion. So this is a reasonable compromise, and I think I can end up supporting it.
Is there any further discussion on this? Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to generally agree with all that was said. And the reality is that there's politics involved with the school committee. There's politics involved with the other three towns. And what happened in the end that brought the number down for Amherst brought the number up for Pelham and Leverett. And so fairly substantially. And there was a lot of anxiety that, especially that was expressed by Leverett, but I'm actually in more contact with Pelham people, as it turns out, than I am with Leverett people this year. But I think that, everybody's feeling the stress about this, and it belongs to all of the communities. We did raise the question. As a result, it went back to the school committee. School committee brought in the Tessie people, and the Tessie people said, hey, you can't do what you want to do. And they essentially said, you have to go back to the regional agreement. We're not going to allow this making up of an amount each year, whether no matter what you call it, and so that's what happened. And I think that we, for those reasons, really need to just do it and be supportive of the other, plus other two towns. Two of the other towns have already voted. I had a couple questions. One was this, technically, I don't think this was on the agenda for today's meeting.
We put it on the agenda.
Yep,
It is on the agenda.
I had Melissa add it.
Okay, because I was looking at the agenda that was posted in the packet. And
I actually never looked at it. I just asked.
It's in the list of topics, which is where it needs to be.
And the other question is, where's the order itself?
The order was
So there is a list of orders on page 296 of Paul's final budget, which is where I got the order number and the assessment. And it has just a line item of appropriating $19,744 and $8 for order number 226-02 regional school budget assessment. And it's under the raise and appropriate number. So it's got an order number and the assessment.
Is it FY 2602?
It's on page 296.
No, what is it order FY?
Order number 2602.
Okay, I actually have it. Then I finally found it, and I think that it's pretty straightforward. It's only really a sentence that the town approved the fiscal year 2026 Amherst Pelham Regional School District operating budget of $37,077,171. And the town will be assessed, and it gives the number $19,744,008 based on the unamended Amherst Pelham regional assessment method of an increase of 4.81%. And to meet that, such appropriation authorized the town to raise in the same amount of money. The reason I went through that all is that I raised a question at the council meeting that no one had an answer to, which is, do we this year not have to vote on the assessment method itself? And I think that the answer is coming out yes, and that because that is, no one's provided us an order to that effect.
Andy, in the past, there was a vote to amend the assessment method. This year, there's no amendment to the assessment method. Like you read in the order, it's the unamended assessment method. So we don't need a separate vote.
Okay. So I just wanted clarity on that. So I think that we're set. If people want to actually see the order, I can share screen, but it's not necessary.
So Andy, if you would send it, if you have found the wording of all of that, if you send it, we can attach it to the report, and it will have to be in the council packet in the format that it needs to be in the council packet as well.
I think that it was actually in.
It might be in the council packet.
It's been in a prior council packet. That's how I found it.
Right, because
I will send it to you immediately after we adjourn.
yeah, I'm just saying that, Mandy, I think it would be good to do that. And then we have, the other thing that I think is useful is the request that came to us shows the total budget. You know, where the 4.8, I'd like to have both those documents in our report. So then when we're talking about the total budget is going up by such and such, people can see what we're talking about. I just find it useful not to refer to something that's in a packet somewhere. So if everyone's okay, I know it bulks it up, but the words in the report can be short, but the documents will tell people what we're talking about. So any other discussion? If not, I will call for a vote. Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Kathy is a yes. Mandy,
Aye.
Bernie,
Yes, support.
support. I got it. And Andy,
Yes.
so we will record the vote. So thank you everyone for staying over. My watch says we're 10 minutes over, but I thought this was a really terrific discussion on a report. And Mandy has offered to do a draft and we'll try to get it back to, today is Tuesday. We'll get it back to everyone to just check the wording on it the way we always do with reports before I submit it to the council. Is there anything else? The one request.
It probably won't come till tomorrow morning, Kathy, because I forgot I had something going on tonight.
I don't think, you know, instant gratification is not necessary, but that.
It's almost written, it just needs some stuff added and tweaked.
So I already put this out to everyone, but and then Bernie said, if you want him to consolidate to the extent we can get the questions, those of us who don't have an assignment for a section, if we're reading it, Mandy seems to be reading the whole budget book, which I'm eternally grateful for. Get the questions to the person who does, and to the extent we can send a consolidated thing through to Melissa rather than asking staff to merge two lists. So then people won't get, you know, we didn't do that with the safety group, Andy, so they got two separate lists, but we'll try to do that going forward. And then if there is general agreement, once we get that consolidated list, we'll make sure everyone sees it on the committee, and we'll post it in the packet. So with that agreement, I just want to make, that's a process agreement. So I think we're ready to adjourn unless anyone has any remaining. Thursday is the 15th, so it's a 4 o'clock meeting. It's our one off to avoid colliding with TSO. And so we're there with public safety. I will look for a motion to, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Also move.
Okay, and I'll call for a vote. Bob?
Aye.
Kathy's a yes. Mandy?
Aye.
Bernie?
Yes.
And Andy?
Yes.
We are adjourned. And thank you, Melissa and Athena, for staying over. Thank you very much to everyone. We are adjourned.
Thanks. Bye.